Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be taking a look at a news story that I saw yesterday that just kind of really shocked me, to be honest. I looked at this and the way that it was being framed and portrayed and everything, it honestly just blows my mind because I know for a fact that if this guy wasn't a cop, this would not be getting framed this way whatsoever. So I don't know if you guys have seen this entire situation or not yet. It did go somewhat viral on social media. I saw a lot of people, especially on Twitter, talking about this whole thing and kind of discussing the situation and whatnot. And I don't know, man, the more that I read into it, the more that it seems like this whole thing was avoidable. You look at the situation, you look at the details, you kind of really figure out what really went on beyond just that headline, and the more it just seems like complete neglect and carelessness, man. I just don't even understand how something like this happens to people who, from what I understand, are supposed to be pretty well trained on using a firearm in the first place. These are police officers that were involved in this situation, and yet, of course, that part is it's not that it's being played down, but I feel like there should be a lot more focus on that entire situation there because, I mean, like I said, these guys are cops. Aren't they supposed to be well trained? You're protecting and serving your community and you don't know to avoid things like this. These are the types of people that I just don't think should be cops. I'm gonna just be straight up with you, man. There's just no way that somebody with this level of ignorance with a firearm should have ever been in a position of control like that. There's just no excuse, no debate. Anyway, this situation unfolded in Florida because, of course, it unfolded in Florida. It seems like every crazy news story ever takes place in Florida, but a young Florida deputy was accidentally shot and killed by his roommate, also an officer, while the pair took a break from playing video games, officials said. Brevard County Sheriff's Deputy Andrew Lawson called 911 early Saturday and told a dispatcher that he had accidentally fired a round at his colleague Austin Walsh, 23, and needed urgent help. Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey said Lawson and Walsh were taking a break from playing an online video game just before the tragedy. Lawson told investigators that he, quote, jokingly pointed a gun at his best friend and pulled the trigger thinking that he had unloaded the firearm. Walsh was struck once and died at the scene, cops said. Lawson was taken into custody on a no-bond warrant by agents from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement on a manslaughter rap, Ivey said in a Facebook post. He turned himself in on Sunday, officials said. So, okay, obviously, we can't get around the fact that this is a tragic situation, right? No one should have died. This is completely avoidable. A family lost somebody, right? This kid was 23. His mother and father no longer have a son. He's dead over something that, let's be real, is completely avoidable, should have never have happened, and with any level of common sense, this entire thing would never have happened, right? And once again, I really want to stress this part of the story. These guys are police officers, right? Which means, from my understanding, don't they have to go through a mandatory gun training course or something, right? They have to take something to teach them how to use a firearm, when the appropriate time to have a firearm be drawn, things like that, right? Because, I mean, if these guys are cops and they're carrying a gun around all the time, they should have to have that, right? And I figure that that's what's going on. I don't know. I've never been through police training. There's God knows how many counties across the entire United States with all kinds of different training requirements probably, and different things that they kind of prioritize in the process and whatever. So it's really hard for me to imagine though that this is a situation where these guys were not educated on gun safety. And with that, I feel like that plays a very critical part in the entire story because this guy can't feign ignorance. He can't just be oh, hey, I didn't know what I was doing, LOL, accidentally shot my bro. No, dude, you work with a gun every day. You've been training with a gun for years at this point of your life. There's no excuse. You can't just get away with some shit like this. So he says that he, quote, jokingly pointed a gun at his best friend and pulled the trigger. Now, let's just call a spade here. There's no joke there. That's not fucking funny. To do a joke, to commit to a joke, there has to be a punchline or something to make it fucking funny. Pointing a deadly weapon at somebody and utilizing it is not a fucking joke. There's nothing funny about that. Even if the gun was unloaded, you never point a fucking firearm at somebody you do not intend to shoot. It's that simple. You would never take a knife and thrust the blade into someone's fucking stomach as a joke, so why would you take a fucking gun and pull the trigger at your best friend? There's no joke to it, bro. It's just fucking murder, if we're being honest. Like, he straight up killed this guy. He shot him once, and the dude died right there at the scene. I don't know where he got shot. I imagine it had to have been to a pretty critical part of his body. You know, the head, the heart, maybe the vein through his leg, something like that, right? In order to have killed him with the one shot. But at the end of the day, like, for me personally, right, I've never taken a gun safety course. I've never been through any formal training, but I am a firearm owner. I'm a proud believer in the Second Amendment. I was taught how to utilize firearms by my father and my grandfather. So essentially, they took me out into a field, right? They set up some targets. They pulled the truck up. There was guns in the bed of the truck. And there was a couple of things that at a young age, I was like 7 or 8 when I first fired a firearm, right? And there was a couple things that I was taught very seriously right off the jump. And the very first thing, and like, can't stress that enough, the first fucking thing that I was taught when I first learned how to use a firearm was you never fuck around and play with a gun. They're not a toy. It's not a game. You know, you do not fuck around with a gun. It is a deadly weapon. It can and will kill somebody in the blink of an eye, and you can't take that back once it's done. You can't erase this, right? Like, you can't bring your friend back in this situation. You can't shoot somebody, kill them, and then them come back to life. This isn't a fucking video game, right? The very first thing I was taught: you do not point a gun at someone unless you intend to shoot them with it. I can imagine that if 8-year-old Optimus was able to figure that out in a fucking field in Ohio with a fucking Wasser rifle and a fucking 9mm handgun with his dad and grandfather, that these trained police officers that are protecting and serving their community could probably have also figured that out at the age of what? 23 is what this colleague who was killed was aged at? I don't know the actual dude's age who shot him, but he's an adult. You know, there's no excuse. Now, he says he thought that he unloaded the firearm. Well, that's why you don't point the fucking gun at somebody and pull the trigger. And like, it's not hard to figure out if a gun's loaded or not, man. Like, eject the magazine, rack the fucking slide, see if a bullet comes out the chamber. Fucking check your gun, man. It's not that hard, dude. Like, there's a gun sitting next to me right now as I'm recording this. I can pick that gun. I know it's loaded, by the way, but if I wanted to make sure that gun was unloaded, it's not hard. You pick the fucking thing up, you slide the magazine where all the ammunition's out, since there's definitely going to be a round in the fucking chamber. I'm going to rack the slide and make sure it ejects the round. It's that fucking simple. Like, it's not hard stuff, dude. This is stuff that even like if you've never shot a firearm before, you should be able to kind of pick up on and know. Austin and Andrew were the best of friends, and Andrew was completely devastated over what happened, Ivy said in a Facebook post. Even with that, there is no excuse for this tragic and totally avoidable death. Ivy said that Walsh had fulfilled a lifelong dream of being a police officer and started with the Brevard Agency at age 18 after enrolling in a cadet program. Quote, "Man, Austin was such a great kid," Ivy said. "Our hearts are broken at his loss. He will be deeply missed by our agency, our community, and our prayers are with his family." It is honestly very unfortunate. I mean, a 23-year-old, I don't want to say kid because he's a grown man, you know what I mean? But a 23-year-old quote-unquote kid, as a lot of older people would call him, had his entire life ahead of him, had already accomplished a lot. I know a lot of people shit on police officers and there's a lot of hatred for him. I understand some of the hatred. I've had bad experiences with the police myself, but not every cop is a bad person. And I feel like a lot of people are able to discern that, right? Not every cop is a bad guy. This was a 23-year-old who probably went into this job with the intention of protecting and serving his community, you know, trying to solve some of the issues in his community, and simply trying to make the place that he lived a better place for everybody around him, right? And now his life has been senselessly taken from him because his friend wasn't smart enough to fucking not shoot him. It's sad, man. Like, it's depressing as fuck when you read a situation like this in the news, right? Because, I mean, that's a family who's now lost their 23-year-old. Like I said, there's a mother out there mourning the loss of her son. There's a father out there mourning the loss of their son. There's a chance that, you know, his brothers and sisters now have to mourn, if he has any, all of his friends, you know? This entire sheriff's office that's come to know and love him over the 5 years, I guess, that he's been with the agency. This guy made an impact on the world around him, and he was living a fulfilling life. Like, he accomplished his goals and everything, and he had everything senselessly taken from him because his friend is just a jackass. Let's call it what it is here. And I get people make mistakes, but dude, your mistakes should not cost someone else their life. It's that simple. If you do, maybe you make a mistake, right? Maybe you do fuck up, right? But if your mistake mistake cost someone their life, that is the ultimate unforgivable action. Now, one thing I don't like about this story in particular is how it's being framed as, oh, they were playing online video games when it happened, you know, which is true. They were playing online games. I guess that is kind of an important detail in this story, but what I'm worried is that dumbasses, and let's just call it what it is here too, the dumbasses are gonna take that part of the story, they're gonna hyper focus in on that. Oh, they were playing fucking Call of Duty, they were playing a violent game, no wonder he shot him, you know, it turns everyone violent. And we're gonna hear the same recycled stupid arguments from people who don't understand science and basic information. You know, oh, the video games made him do it, the video games are violent, they made him pull the trigger. When in reality, I think anyone with any common sense knows that's just not the case. This was a guy who didn't adequately, you know, realize the consequences of his actions. He made a dumbass mistake and it costed his best friend his life. It had nothing to do with the fact that they were playing video games. They could have been running a marathon and the same thing could have happened. But I really don't want it to get spun that way, because you know how the media and these old heads and shit, you know how they are. They don't want to actually put any of the responsibility on the person themselves for making the fucking stupid decision, for pulling the trigger that killed their friend in a stupid moronic moment, right? They want to blame the video game that they were playing shortly before everything happened, because that's just how the world is, man. But at the end of the day, just a tragic situation all around. And like, I read this and it breaks my heart, man. Like, it really does, because like, I'm a young guy, right? You know, and I can't imagine like just going to a party or anything, right, where something like this happens. I don't get what goes through your head that makes you do something like that. I've never had like any part of my body tell me to pick up a gun, aim it at somebody, and pull the trigger as a joke. That's not fucking funny. There's no joke there. And it just, unfortunately, it resulted in a tragedy like this, and now a whole community has to mourn. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like. Subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel. Follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shoptimus down below. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus. Well, just calling it how I see it, to be honest here, and signing out.